Alrighty, 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to No Offense. Thank you for tuning in this week. It's your favorite podcast, hosted by your 3 favorite guests or your hosts, and powered by Ave Tequila. Today's episode is super important. I want to start off with a little bit of a fact. So every year in America, over 900 people are wrongfully convicted of crimes they did not commit. And it's a big tragedy. And our guest today has firsthand experience with this, was on death row for over 20 years until being released in early 2000s. And to share his experience today, we got Nick Yarris on the show.
My name is Nick Yarris. I grew up in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, on the East Coast of the United States. I have the distinction of having my life stop and having to start my life twice, sincerely. In my first version of starting my life off, it was really beautiful to grow up in a city that prided itself on competitions for the gardens and neighborhoods that looked beautiful. I remember there were block captains and people who would go out and help the elderly do their gardens. Philadelphia was actually the end of the underground slave railroad. And we prided ourselves on being the city of brotherly love at one point. It was a really cool thing. And it seems coincidental, and I keep going back to this moment, but I keep thinking about it. The very year of 1968, when I was 7 years old, the 2 biggest events in my life happened, with Martin Luther King Jr. being shot dead in Tennessee, and then being attacked by a man in my neighborhood who sexually assaulted me and hit me in the head with a field stone and left me with a brain injury. My whole life flipped in that moment, but it was easy to be overlooked when the cities around me were on fire and the National Guard were being called in, and then Robert Kennedy Jr. got shot. So John F. Kennedy's brother got killed in 1968 in Los Angeles. And it just seemed the whole world was chaos. Nothing made sense. I grew up in a very hard city of Philadelphia. My father was a roofer. My mother worked as a cashier down at the airport. And my grandmother, she ran the house with 6 kids in it. So I just fell through the cracks, man. And I realized now my biggest mistake was I kept a secret with my attacker, and it destroyed my life because I began to hate myself for being bonded to him in that way. So by the time I was a 17-year-old boy, I was a drug addict. At the age of 20, I stole a car and I was arrested in the city of Chester, Pennsylvania. And a police officer charged me falsely with the attempted murder and kidnapping of him. I went through drug withdrawals from my addictions in prison. And I did the stupidest thing possible. In my desperation, I made up a story to try and get out of that lie that officer told on me by saying that I knew information about a murder in the area I read in the newspaper. I didn't know anything. I was just desperate. The police manipulated me. They got another inmate who burglarized the prosecutor's home to say I confessed to him. And then they charged me with the rape and murder of a woman I never met. It was devastating. So I was given a 3-day murder trial. But the reason it was so fast and furious is because before I went on trial for murder, I went on trial for my original charges against that officer, and the jury found me not guilty after only 15 minutes. It really blew their minds. So this has really precipitated me ended up on death row. I angered a prosecutor by getting found not guilty of the officer lying about me and saying I took his gun off him and tried to kidnap him when I was just a 20-year-old drug addict who was trying to go home. So they gave me this farce of a trial that lasted 3 days. And they set it up right before the 4th of July holiday weekend so that the jury would be under pressure to find me guilty. And since they had no evidence, no murder weapon, and they only had a jailhouse confession and the sad fact that I shared B-positive blood with the killer, And in 1981, that's as far as serology could take us in identifying semen. I watched a jury who at first tried to look at me absolutely turn away from me on the third day of the trial. They showed the jury photographs of where the victim was found. And she was found by these two little boys. And you could see where they had been standing around her was dark blood. But when they ran away from her, it turned lighter and lighter. And ironically, they ran in an arc away from her body. And the photograph to me looked like an angel laying in the ground. After they showed that photograph and others to the jury could no longer not look at me. But a huge thunderstorm came upon us right then. And a bolt of lightning hit the courthouse and knocked all the power out. The sheriff jumped up like I was somehow conspiring with nature to pull an escape. And they pulled their guns on me and took me away from the jury table, got me out of there. And they put me in this big room upstairs. And I knew I was going to be convicted, I knew that those people were told a lie. They were told that I went out and murdered this woman because she looked like my girlfriend. So I wasn't on trial for the crime of committing murder. I was on trial for being mentally decrepit and twisted and sick and fixating on a woman who I never met and went out and killed her because she looked like my girlfriend. And these people hated that. And they hated me. But I heard this thing in my head, go down there and look him in the eye. So I did. And when the judge was pronouncing me guilty, he couldn't look me in the eye. And when he was handing me my sentence, he couldn't look me in the eye. So I told him to go to hell, and instead that was my punishment. They sentenced me to death plus 60 years, and they sent me to hell on earth, Huntington State Prison, the only prison in American history condemned by the United Nations for its active practices of torture.
No way. What are the practices of torture there?
You're not allowed to speak in your cell.
Not even to yourself?
Not even to yourself.
Oh.
When you were stepping back a little bit, the first thing that got you, so the police obviously, they swayed you, like, because at this point you were, you were a drug addict at that point, right? So did they kind of sway you into this conviction? Like, how did that whole thing happen where you got blamed for this exactly? If you could step back.
I made up a story about a drug addict in my neighborhood who robbed me. Oh, okay. And I thought he was dead. When the police found out he was alive, they said to me, you obviously committed this crime and in some way you want to confess because we looked at your childhood health records and your mental health records, and we know you have mental problems. And we want you to confess to us of this murder because we know that's what you're trying to do.
Was this like were they just trying to close this case at this point, or were they just...
It was so sinister. When they took me back from an interrogation session that lasted almost 14 hours, when they were taking my handcuffs off, there were pagan motorcycle gang members being processed into the jail. Detective Randy Martin gave me a big hug in front of those inmates and told me, thanks, Nick, we're going to go kick some doors in now, as if I had given up information as an informant.
Oh, my God.
When I woke up the next morning, a series of attacks began with a sharpened broomstick trying to put my eye out, throwing urine and bleach in my face. And I had to stand for hours with my mattress against my door to stop the attacks. So I lasted 6 days. And then on the 6th day, the leader of the gang told me that if I didn't kill myself and hang myself, they were going to send people to my family's house and kill my parents. So I did. I hung myself.
Wow. This was
You hung
all...
yourself?
So, yeah, what do you hung yourself in It obviously didn't work.
An officer came by and cut me down and smacked me in the face and said I wasn't allowed to cheat the state out of my punishment.
Oh my God.
Wow. And this is all at Huntington.
No, this was in the county jail when I was
county
first
before.
arrested. I wasn't even charged with murder yet.
Oh my God.
It's fucking dark.
And at that point, what state
It
was
was
this in, if you
brutal.
don't mind telling me?
Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania. Okay.
So it's in a little county called Delaware County, right on the south side of Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
And I made the mistake of going across the county line. And it was brutal out there. I was in a Civil War built prison.
Oh, wow.
Windows busted out. And they had me in a strip cell after I tried to kill myself. So for the first 2 weeks after trying to kill myself, I had to be in a strip cell, didn't I? And they put this inmate in the cell next to me named Charles Michael Catalino. He had been convicted of the burglary of William Ryan's home, who was the first assistant district attorney of Delaware County. Charles Michael Catalino was convicted of a jury of not only doing the burglary, but heinous acts like abusing the prosecutors, pets, and stuff. He was facing 20 years for this crime when the district attorney's office went to him and gave him a pass on everything and said, we just want you to do one thing. We're going to put you in the cell next to this guy, and you're going to say he confessed to you the rape and murder of this woman. And he did.
Wow.
He later
Set
came
you up.
forward and told the truth. He came forward later on, told the truth. They were giving him sex visits in the district attorney's office with his girlfriend and everything, man.
Was this just based off of that they were just trying to get this case solved and closed? Like, why did they
wanted to
target you
work.
like this?
I'm going to give you an idea of the atmosphere of what was going on in 1981 and 1982. John W. Hinckley shot President Reagan in broad daylight to try and impress the actress Jodie Foster. Anyone charged with any type of psychologically damaged crime got trounced in the courts.
Mm.
I was charged with the psychologically distorted murder and rape of a woman they said was brought upon by my fixation of breaking up with my 20-year-old girlfriend. So I was in the midst of being pulverized, not for being a criminal, but by being a sick, deviant, monster. And they weren't going to play fair about this, and they had no evidence. And they couldn't get any evidence because I didn't do it. So they hid all of the physical evidence, like the guy that was described being seen at the mall where she was abducted from in Wilmington, Delaware, 26 miles from my home, was 5'7", dark black or brown hair, shoulder length hair down to his shoulders. I was 6'2", blonde and green-eyed. Nothing like the guy.
Wow.
The killer had a pair of gloves that he left inside the victim's automobile with the doors locked, the interior lights left on, as if it was a taunt to the police. And the police knew that those men's winter medium gloves would not physically fit my hands because I was shooting so much meth in my arms. My hands were swollen. They physically destroyed evidence to try and make it look like I did it, man. And I kept feeling bad for one thing. That poor lady. They were helping the murderer get away. I told them that.
And so they were destroying evidence. They destroyed gloves. What else was there anything else that they tampered with that you know of?
Yeah, so that came later on. All right. I get sentenced to death and I get put in Huntington prison. And for the first 2 years of my time, I'm not allowed to speak in my cell. I got a hell of a beat for singing happy birthday in defiance to myself on my 22nd birthday. And I go through this enormous thing of trying to hold on to my sanity when men are jumping off the tier and they're dying of illness, and I'm a kid. So I get a new hearing for a possible new trial, and I'm being transported to Delaware County for a brand new trial, I'm hopeful. I'm on my way to court in February of 1985, and we stopped to use the restroom, and through a series of stupid mistakes, I ended up escaping from custody for the next 25 days and being on the FBI's most wanted list, didn't I? It was insane.
How'd that happen?
I stopped to go to the toilet with the officers, and when I went into the cubicle to urinate, the officer came with me from the passenger side. He held the door and watched me. He was 68 years old, and he said that his bladder was just killing him, and this was his testimony later on. He made a tactical decision to let me go back to the car by myself. Anyone here in this room ever wears eyeglasses in the wintertime and know what it's like to go from a warm automobile outside and then back into that car or anything like that?
Yeah, they fog up.
It fogs your eyes up. I couldn't see anything, gentlemen. What happened to me was I was standing at the urinal, and the next thing I know, I had gotten out of a warm car and I ran with that officer to the cubicle about 30 yards to my left. And we went into the building, and my eyeglasses standing there urinate. My own breath made my eyeglasses fog up even worse. I went under his arm on the way out. And as I did, I trotted in the night back to the officer who was standing with his back to me smoking a cigarette at the front of the car. And he turned on me and he fired point blank. No warning, no stop. He said that he was so quick that he believed that I overpowered his partner back at the toilet when he had his back turned, because there's no possible way a death row prisoner is running at him in the middle of the night.
From the way you say this, you're making it sound like you think they did this on purpose.
No, I'm telling you, through the folly of my own inability to see what was happening, I blindly ran right towards him.
Gotcha.
It was the coldest night of the year. I'm wearing a pair of leather prison shoes. I haven't had shoes on my feet for 2 years. They're killing me. I have a pair of prison trousers on and a prison shirt. It is sub-zero temperatures. That's all I have on. I'm already shaken and cold, and I can't see anything because of my eyeglasses. I'm running at this officer, and he tries to cap me. So I turn and start running, and the next thing I know, he fires another shot. So I started running through this restaurant like I was going to jump through the window, and he stopped shooting, and I ran around the building. And then I ran behind their car, and I hid behind the sheriff's car. I just got out. I took this like 15 minutes of just puking and just like I couldn't stop anything. It was so quick. I couldn't believe it. Like 1 minute I'm in the car talking to them about the Philadelphia Eagles and the new year of what we were looking forward to. And the next thing I know, man, a helicopter has me pinned, and it went on and on. I ran through the woods so hard. I didn't care what the branches were doing to me in fear. So the only way I got away from the helicopter was the infrared wasn't functioning because it was so cold, it froze over. And every time he came down on me with the blades, yeah, he was close to me and he almost got me, but he was blowing up so much snow, he was losing me. And at the very end of it, I was running towards a 10-foot chain link fence with no possible way to scale it. But I didn't know that the snow plows had pushed back the snow and made this big gap at the end of it. So as I was losing my balance and stumbled, I landed on my face and literally swallowed 250 yards down the side of an embankment on the railroad tracks and didn't get a scratch on my face or not. Wow. And I got up and I was just buried in the snow. The helicopter came down on top of me. He stayed there. I jumped up out of the snow, knocked all the snow off me, but I didn't have any injuries. And I just went down like a huge hill, man. I couldn't believe it. So I got up. I walked 5 miles to Fraser, Pennsylvania. I found a 1965 fastback green Mustang, and it didn't have a locking key. The old Mustangs had a dashboard mounted key, and if you turned it hard enough, it would start the engine, and it did. It fired up. I drove to Philly. I met one of my sisters. I got some money off of her. And I went to New York City and I tried to heal. It was the craziest night of my life.
So at that point, I mean, did they have you handcuffed at all during this? Like,
when I was handcuffed, and laying behind the sheriff's vehicle, I took my eyeglasses off and I bit the plastic ends off of the metal bar that runs through it. And that pin is the same circumference as a handcuff.
No way.
I then bent it to the left, stuck it in there, and took the handcuffs off.
Wow. And were you in? Did you have like an outfit on from the prison at all, or no? They had you in regular clothes.
A maroon pair of trousers and a maroon shirt, like a work shirt.
Yeah.
Short sleeve, no less.
Oh my God. It's freezing as you're running through everything.
Yeah, so I had to hide behind the police station, like about 600 yards up on my right. I saw a flag, a municipal building, so I hid behind the police station for 2 hours. And then someone saw me because I was going into convulsions. I was losing my core body temperature. So I broke camp and got out of the police station. And someone saw me in the parking lot. That's when the helicopter chase started for the next couple hours. It was crazy. He had me pinned at one point. I met him later on. He was a former Vietnam pilot. And he and I went over an amazing conversation about the chase.
How did you
He
end up?
couldn't believe. Yeah, it went on. It was unique.
How did you meet him later on?
Hospital. I went to trial for escape when I
So
turned
he was
myself
there.
back in.
Okay. Yeah. So
I was on the run for 25 days, and I realized that I wasn't smart enough to do anything. I realized that I was going to subject my two brothers to attacks from the police as well while they looked for me. So I realized that I couldn't do this, and I had to turn myself back in, even though I was facing a lot of drama. I got 35 years added to my time in Florida. I got to spend 8 months next to cowardly little mouth Ted Bundy on Florida's death row.
Was you right?
I was, yeah, it's a shame, isn't he? He was a little idiot, and everybody glorified him, but everybody in the jail wanted him dead. So trust me, he didn't live a good life in jail. And the other thing was, I knew I had to go back and try somehow to figure this out, right? After they beat me for 4 minutes for escaping, when I got back a year after the escape, I went on this mad journey. I was so angry because they busted me up bad, man. I didn't leave my cell for 8 months, man, without flinching. So I decided to read all of the world's religions, right? Go on this mad 3-year journey almost. And then right after I get to the end of doing that, I get a newspaper about DNA, and I become absolutely convinced in this moment while I'm holding this newspaper, the reason I read everybody's religion is because I was going to need to have respect for everybody for this gift God was about to give me, because I knew I could prove my innocence. In February of 1988, I was the first man in the United States to file an application to prove my innocence using DNA evidence, man.
Oh, wow.
Whoa. That is like a weird like gift from God situation as you're like looking into the religions, and then you find out about DNA, and you're the first person to use that to your advantage.
Just like I said, it's crazy how it keeps coming back to these moments, right? And then began a 15-year-long effort for them to murder me.
How so?
They started destroying the evidence.
Did they really?
Well, I know there's a lot of like there's a
We
lot of like
busted him.
efforts by the police and the prosecutors and things like that to make sure that their cases don't get overturned, especially if it's like a wrongful thing that they've done. Because if his case gets overturned because something the prosecutor or the police did, then there's reason for them to look into every single other case that they've ever tried or
And
prosecuted.
that's what was. Delaware County CID has more wrongful convictions per capita than Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, or Philadelphia
Holy shit.
per capita.
Wow.
It's a small county, but they got numerous ones. I was in there with a kid named Terry McCracken, who was absolutely innocent because he was standing next to the kid that actually did it. And the guy was trying to confess on his behalf, and he got out, went to Arizona, and then actually did commit murder. What a tragedy. So my life was dangling by Damocles' sword, hanging by a tread above my head at any moment, because every time I discovered new evidence, they went and destroyed it and they got away with it. Like, I'll give you one example. A detective named David Pfeiffer took DNA that I found with his serology work. Remember I told you about B positive blood?
Yeah.
Well, I wrote to that lab director myself personally, Dominic, and I said, please tell me to save some of this evidence. He said, yeah, I did. I got 2 well-preserved slide preparations with numerous well-preserved spermatozoa to the visual eye on them. Just tell me what needs to be done. So I got my lawyer. I said, do me a favor. Don't tell the prosecutor. Let's go to a judge and get a court order so it's on record that it's supposed to go to the coroner's office, right? Because he's the legal custodian of evidence from a homicide. Detective Pfeiffer went up there on his own, took the evidence and put it into his desk for the next 3 years. And when I finally forced the federal court upon them, it was sent to a lab and it was revealed to have no evidence upon them at all.
What?
And this is when it started that you were able to, or you said, or the detective no longer had it. Is that what you mean?
No, the detective had the slides, but there was no longer any visible sperm under the stained and protected slides. It was all gone.
I see. So where was the point in which you were finally able to get the DNA to prove that you weren't a part of that?
I had to ask to be executed. I was so sick with hepatitis C from when they beat me and broke my teeth. When I escaped, I didn't know that they infected me with hepatitis C, and it was a really nasty strain. So in 2002, I listened to a guy named Dale Carter dying in the cell underneath me, screaming in agony of impacted bowel syndrome. And the nurses, knowing that he was convicted of rape like me, would come over and taunt him and ask him if he wanted an aspirin and then laugh at him. Shit.
They would
So
taunt
I was
him
like,
as he was
man,
dying.
You're fucking right, they did.
My God.
Shit.
That's ruthless.
I lived in a unit. Man, I lived in a unit where I've seen things you don't ever want to know. People change. Imagine some woman who's taken a beat at home by her husband gets a chance to exact revenge on men all day long.
Mm.
Men aren't the only evil ones, man. I'm going to tell you a story I always try and keep quiet. A guy named Ben Porter stabbed me because I had a bounty on me. Understand? The family wanted me dead. I don't blame them. They thought I killed this. I probably would have done the same. A guy named Ben stabs me so deeply, I got to hold onto the blade and cut my hand off on headbutt the hell out of him to get him to stop sticking it in me. And he's just that. And I end up in a really horrible situation where all I can do is this attack. I can't be. This is what happening. The phone. Okay. After the attack, a nurse waited for the officers to hold me down in the triage room. And then in a very facetious voice, she said, "What's this, Mr. Yarris? What's sticking out of your belly where he had stabbed me?" And then she said, "Is that a fingernail? Is that one of the victim's fingernails where she tried to save her own life from you murdering her, you cocksucker?" Then she stuck her fingers in where he stabbed me, and I passed out just myself.
What?
What the fuck?
And this was the nurse at the jail.
And Huntington Prison.
Jesus Christ.
And would they treat everybody like this? Was this like a common practice that all inmates were treated like this?
Sexual predators, child killers, cops, snitches all get the same. I was on the wrong list.
That's fucked up.
When you were in there, was this treatment like this the whole time you were there?
Off and on. After a while, man, it just went crazy. I spent 3 years next to the real Buffalo Bill. I lived through a riot 1989 where the guards ran off the block laughing that we were going to burn to death because the prison was on fire. I watched 11 men commit suicide. I finally got my blessing in one thing. In 2003, when I decided to dismiss my attorneys and ask to be executed because I couldn't wait and let them torture me like I watched Dale Carter suffer, I was given the blessing that the DNA finally started to come through. In February 2003, the first DNA results came from the killer's gloves that were hidden, the ones that wouldn't fit my hands. And the police knew they were up against the wall. So they had one last test to do, and they made this big show of it. I told them, there ain't no bother. Do the damn testing. I didn't do it. And they did. So Dr. Edward Blake, who did the O.J. Simpson murder trial DNA, conclusively proved that the DNA inside the underwear of the victim that was found in the 23rd hour matched the killer's gloves, and that none of it matched me. So instead of this big joyous celebration, I have to tell my mom over phone this news while my alcoholic brother at the time was having a seizure at her feet. And then I had to go into solitary confinement, worse than death row, because they thought I was going to get them for what they were doing to me.
They put you into solitary after you were found innocent because they were afraid of what you were going to do.
Worse than death row. They put me in an ultra secure unit with the officer stationed outside so that I couldn't manufacture weapons to kill them because they knew what I could do.
Oh my God.
What, if you mind, what was like the experience? How long were you in solitary confinement for at that point during that stint?
I had done all 23 years in solitary confinement. I ended up doing 8,057 days in solitary confinement total.
Wow. How do you get through that?
You learn to love yourself. When the whole world's against you, don't be an idiot and get sad. Fucking love yourself.
God, yeah. I'm sure that you've definitely gone through so much.
How many times, Dominic, Drew, all of you, how many times you've been down and you added to your own shit by being the worst negative in the room?
True.
Instead of being that coach that was building you up. Well, look, this is how I did it. I took all the titties, pictures of the outside world or whatever was glued to that stinking wall, and I took a photograph of me catching this carp up on the Susquehanna River that made me proud of myself. And I knew that Mickey in that photograph was going to get me through this. He was the one that had to be strong enough to help me survive and figure out how not to get killed in here and how to navigate this thing. So the only thing I had to hope for was this. They're going to take my life. I can't win. All I want is, I grew up in Philadelphia, and I spoke very guttural linguistics. I mean, it was horrible. And with the damage done to my brain from aphasia, I didn't have patience to learn how to be an educated speaker. So I had one duty. Do not let them embarrass you on the day that they execute you. I had to learn to have a death speech that didn't bring me to my knees and faltering. I had to come up with some way to forgive them. So I began this enormous effort to educate myself and grow and become someone sound of mind enough to love myself so that on the day they took my life, I had my speech ready. That's all I could hope for. This is why I speak in the manner that I do. I had to develop a cadence so that I could control the aphasia in my brain that will go too fast if I allow it. If I don't slow down and try to articulate, I cannot continue on, and it really comes to a point where I'd actually shut down. Really? It took me many years, but I've read many thousands of books to myself aloud while looking at that photograph, or I took the time to prepare one massively cool 2-minute speech and just dropped the mic on it because I knew I was going to be executed no matter what.
Did you ever write that down, and do you still have that?
Yeah, I'd love to hear that.
Of course. It's about the analogy of being a neutrino. I apologize. Chest pain. All right, so I made this beautiful analogy of how my life is like a neutrino, and that neutrinos pass through the earth every day, and that just as all of the world is ignorant of how many beautiful neutrinos pass right through the hardest subjects. And no matter what surface it is, I was like that neutrino, and that I was going to just pass right through them. And I was going to try my best to forgive them for taking my life. What else could I do, man? I didn't do it.
That's so respectable for you to maintain this like kind of good spirit and also this like spirit of forgiveness, even after you were treated pretty in a really fucked up way for years.
I learned this amazing gift, right? I started to imagine them with their children or their mothers. And when they tried to hurt me, I felt pity for them. I felt sorry. They hated it. The look on my face would destroy them because I looked at them with love, care, and they couldn't understand why. How could a monster that did that to that woman look at me like that or be polite to me? Shut the fuck up. Who are you talking to? But I didn't stop. I just knew if I could feel compassion for them, I wouldn't have to kill them.
Did you become it's because it's how you're talking. I don't know how it was during prison. Did you become very religious? Because you said you read all those texts. Did you have any sense of God or maybe something else that you were like relying on while in there?
And you forgot. At the beginning of the story, I explained what a thief I used to be. So I did the most clever thing of all. I stole all the brilliant tenets from every religion, and I dispensed with the silly ones like stoning someone on Friday for eating meat.
Yeah.
Because it was only supposed to be fish because their diet couldn't stand that much beef being eaten in their neighborhood. You know, come on, the obvious ones, right?
Yeah.
I love it that there is a hand-in-hand connection between neuroplasticity healing, which I go around the world speaking about, and prayer. If you pray, even if you just are making the effort to be pliant to the thought that there is something guiding you, you're actually releasing toxins from your brain and healing, no matter what you get out of the prayer.
Really?
Yeah. All right, I'm going to explain to you what neuroplasticity is. Just like Pavlov demonstrated by a dog who would salivate by a ringing of a bell, your brain waits for the ringing of a smile. Your brain looks for the engagement of others when you're pleasant towards them, and it feeds off of it, and it gives you that childhood reward that it got when you pleased mommy, pleased daddy. We are a species, gentlemen, and one of the things about us is we have a built-in receptor for PTSD erasing. We can get rid of all of the PTSD of our childhood and everything else because it's already there. Have you ever seen someone in a high-profile job? I'll give you an example. Someone who's stood out because the video pops up of a flight attendant who goes through the effort to make everyone laugh. Irrespective of what you're seeing, that man's brain is healing. He doesn't have time to think about his sister dying of cancer and all of those things that are negative. He's caught up in the whirlwind of changing and erasing the pathways back to the negative thought. The reason you recycle a thought, you actually reconnect to that thought on a broken passage, and it becomes more broken and more fissured until you convince yourself things happened that didn't actually occur. And you can't understand how you got that memory wrong. You're like, that's not possible. But I was so sure of it. And then someone else was there and said, oh, you're wrong. And you're like, what? Want to know why? Your ego was driving you to go back to that original damage and believe in it, irrespective of the truth. And if you don't believe me, this is what's happening in America right now. People who are angry are cutting off neurons to the truth. Angry people can't absorb truth. They did a study with children who are taught kindness as a curriculum, learn and absorb information almost 1/3 better than a child who doesn't have that in their curriculum.
Really?
Get it? Neuroplasticity is real. I have been on the streets for 19 years, and I've gone through a SIDS death where my daughter died, bless her, at 6 months in my arms. I've gone through every kind of hardship from right now, even being homeless, as you know. But I've never had one psychiatric counseling session. I've never needed it.
Yeah, you've taken yourself through that for years, I'm sure. I'm sure you've gone through every different possibility. I mean, there's tons of stories of like ancient philosophers and the Stoics and things like that who would like lock themselves into caves voluntarily to try to just learn about themselves. And you've gotten this like, I don't want to call it a cool opportunity, but you've definitely gone through an experience where you could know more about yourself than anyone.
I have a super cool, brilliant thing going on where I'm living one of the greatest stories ever.
Yeah. You were saying that, you're living this like crazy cool experience. And sometimes when you're just driving through England, you think to yourself, and I think that's about when we cut off.
Yeah. So I keep thinking about this interview I had with Jennifer Gonnerman from the Village Voice in 2004, who after 2 hours of interviewing me, set down her paper and pen and said, "Damn, Nick, you do know you're actually living one of the greatest stories ever." And I said to her, "I swear to God, it's going to have to keep going, isn't it?" She said, "That's something." And I always think about that now. So since that time, can you imagine such heights as me in Geneva, Switzerland, addressing the Human Rights Council on stage with the president of the European Union, on stage with the president of Switzerland to a standing ovation? In only 10 months after I was released from prison, I went to Rome and I performed. I went to England and spoke before the government, to France to speak before the government, to Sweden to do the same. I took my education around the world, man. I knew, just like I heard, the day that they were going to find me guilty for thinking I killed that poor lady. Look them in the eye. It's not you. So just hold your head up. Don't ever be afraid to look anyone in the eye. That's who you are. If someone takes that from you, you know what I mean? So I've always had this boldness about me where right now I'm on the verge of having a TV show produced. I got a brand new documentary coming out called Life After Death. I have a documentary coming out about my friend with cancer that I'm producing. I'm back in England restarting my life, and I started over from scratch. Want to know why? Because I can hold my head up and look myself in the mirror and believe in myself. It took a lot to get it there, but I like that about me.
I mean, it's only as bad as what your mindset brings, right? And if you can stay positive, you always see that. I mean, if you think about it, somebody could look at their life and from a certain perspective, be like, wow, this is a really terrible life. But there's somebody who can look at it and be like, man, this is a great life you're living. It's all about perspective, I feel like. And also, what great stories haven't had tragedy, right?
Right. So look at it from this perspective. All of my childhood friends and both my brothers are dead, and God saved my life by sending me to death row.
Mm-hmm.
They're all dead, man. And all of the jury that found me guilty are gone. No one left to feel sorry for. I felt sorry for them. I never hated them.
Yeah, you've developed like a really great skill of like loving yourself so much that you don't need love from anyone else. So you could just, you're humble, you can restart, move anywhere, live in a car, and you don't care what anyone thinks. That's so respectable.
Dude, I started this morning off getting up at 5 a.m., getting myself together at a campsite in Twickenham, England, and then recording a podcast for a 17-year-old who's starting his podcast for Mongolia, so that I could reach a corner of the world I would never have access to. And I'm proud to say I'm his first podcast guest. And then I'm going to conclude it this evening with 3 beautiful, smiling faces that I earned respect from, not because I was some tough ass who went through prison, but because I went in there and found what all of you are hoping to find in yourselves when shit hits the fan. Who are you, gentlemen? Who are you going to be when the chips are down is really what you want out of life, right? And these are the moments to sit around others who've had that challenge, that mega challenge. And what they come back to say to you, I hope, is the same. I will say to you, you do everything in your life because of love. You don't get up in the morning just because of you. You get up because you love the people who raised you and fed you and care about you now, right?
Correct.
That's what got me through death row. I recognize one thing about myself. I'm a loving man. I can't turn against my nature. As such, Being a loving person is the only thing going to get me through this. Thank God for neuroplasticity. I swear to God, I've been given this gift. I didn't know when I first got out. My mother said, Nicky, sit down. I need you to do me a favor. Please listen to me. Be a polite man. Say yes, sir. No, sir. Please say thank you. And always make sure that people feel good for your words, because I want you to show respect for what was done to this family. And I was like, whoa. I didn't understand that was the key formula for neuroplasticity healing. And now that I practice this utter polite persona over and over each day, every chance I get, I don't have any PTSD.
Yeah.
It's like I think it was Ram Dass who said that love is the way. Loving kindness was
Yeah.
the Ram Dass idea. I love it.
I have a question.
How about this one?
Go ahead, Nick.
Upon looking back and reflecting, I see clearly the answer was only love. Man, that's a good one, right? I know I misquoted it, but it's beautiful sentiment.
Yeah.
Go ahead. What were you saying?
I was going to ask, during, when you obviously got all this stuff put against you, your family, right? What was their reaction to this? Was there anybody who maybe didn't believe you?
My mom, I just put a video up on YouTube about that. My mom went to the crime scene, made diagrams, wrote to senators. She cooked me dinner at the time of the murder, man. Her famous line was, you could say what you want, but I was feeding my son dinner at the time you said he was killing this person. You can't change my mind. Mm-hmm. I had a bank receipt from 3:05 p.m. where I paid my mom's phone bill that day. I wasn't nowhere near the site, and DNA later on proved it, and they knew it.
You've got such a great way of looking at it now, but I would imagine in the very beginning there had to have been some form of just innate anger in you when you were in prison for something you didn't do. I mean, how did you...
I beat my head on the wall. I beat my head on the wall, and I beat my head on the wall so much they used to have to take me out of the cell to the triage to patch my head up. An officer took pity on me, and he let me go in the cell for a man that killed himself. And I picked up 5 books that weren't badly stained from urine or water or whatever. And he told me to take those books to my cell and start reading. And he saved my life.
Do you remember those books?
Yes. It was the Webster's 1971 dictionary with the front cover missing. It was the 1936 Tabler's Medical Encyclopedia. It was the Count of Monte Cristo because it had a hot girl on the front cover. And it was The Prophet by Khalil Gibran that I had and I cherished. And the last one was a GED instruction booklet on how to write paragraphs and sentences.
Wow.
Those were the first 5 books in my life. And they created this enormous repertoire of education for me. I took the dictionary apart. Any word that I didn't understand, I wrote down the definition. I wrote the spelling down 10 times. I wrote its definition down 10 times. And then I used it in 10 different sentences, and I never forgot that word until I had mastered an enormous dictum.
Wow. That's awesome.
Were you fully convinced, obviously even when you asked for your execution, were you fully convinced that was the way that your life was going to go? Or did you have a little spring of hope that there was going to be a chance to get out?
No, I've lived brilliantly with no hope. I went through 6 years of psychology courses and learning to be a learned lawman. And I've done so much work when I had no hope of getting out. So I understand what it's like to live and not just be alive. See, to live, I can live anywhere. You can put me in a shark tank. I'll come out with a shark skin suit, I always say, because it doesn't matter where you put me. I know how to live. I know how to be alive to the gift that I am, the prayers that I'm answering, the many people who survived just to give me my life. What a blessing I am. They went through plagues and wars and everything. My grandparents, the irony is my father just died 2 days after my birthday this year. His grandfather was Russian and my grandmother was Ukrainian. So his last lines to me were, so I guess you saw that Sound of Freedom is the #1 film in America, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the same film company making my movie. But
Oh, no way.
so I met Alejandro Monteverdi 7 years ago, right after he began the project with Tim Ballard.
Yeah.
And he had a really tragic incident in his life years ago. And I helped him through it. And he said that God told him he has to make certain movies, and mine was the one he was going to make. So they're going to start announcing that they're going to do my film next and start casting it, which is a helpful thing for me. But my plan is to get well out of the way. Are you seeing how they're ripping Tim apart?
Oh, yeah.
No.
The Sound of
They're
Freedom.
accusing. Yeah, they're trying to say he's a QAnon
Yeah.
participant and all that.
Because of human
Which is
trafficking
weird.
conspiracy
Which is comical.
theories.
Yeah, because he was not even around when QAnon. This story began in 2014.
Oh, I see.
You saw that, right?
No, I haven't seen that.
Oh, you
movie
didn't see
yet.
that one yet.
I want to
Okay.
see it.
I
bad.
saw the one. Wait, maybe.
It's the human trafficking one?
Oh, the one
You
I was
did see
telling you
that
about.
one,
Yeah, I
yeah.
saw that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Is that one
I
Mel,
think it's
Mel Gibson's a part of?
That movie's really, really awesome.
Right, that's
really good
Jim
movie.
Caviezel, right?
Yeah, super
And Jim
sad,
wants
but-
to play me in the league. So, you know what I mean? It's a great opportunity. There's a lot of controversy. I'm going to get out of the way.
Yeah.
It's teaching me to be smart enough to know something that big comes your way, get out of the way.
Yeah.
for sure.
Have an exit strategy.
How long is that? Do you talk about this process for like making a movie for a long time, or do they kind of just like pitch you a concept? Like, how does that even come about?
The Fear of 13 came out in 2015 and the world went wild. I had 96%, 97% positivity on Rotten Tomatoes. And I met the head of the Muhammad Ali Foundation. And he, at the time, just was blown away by the film opportunity. And he brought me into a meeting with Alejandro by actually setting Alejandro up. And I was brought to a red carpet affair in Los Angeles. And while I was there, Anthony got Alejandro to go home and watch The Fear of 13. And then Alejandro watched it for 96 minutes and came back to the event and walked up to me and said, "Man, I'm going to make a movie about your life." So we've been at it since 2016. I signed contracts with them in 2017, and I moved to Oregon after being rejected at the Canadian border. So I ended up living for 4 years waiting for my movie to be made in Oregon. Everything stalled because of COVID, and there's been so many close opportunities. Mel Gibson, Tony Robbins, his wife Sage Robbins, Pierce Brosnan, they've all been so generous in trying to help me get it done. But it just kept going the same way that The Sound of Freedom was going. It was just going to take the time that it needed to take for it was going to get made. And no matter how much you push, it doesn't work.
That's insane. That's a long process too. And COVID really screwed a lot of that up. I mean, at least you guys are able to start hopefully doing it soon.
Hey
and
Nick,
getting into it.
since we're already started, honestly, we could put all this is all good stuff. We could put let's flip your phone sideways so we can get the wide angle.
Yeah, probably, hopefully
That's
there,
something
yeah.
else, don't worry about it. It's just for Adobe.
Yeah, it's perfect.
There you go, perfect.
No,
Yeah,
wait.
Let's keep going.
That
Yeah,
makes
we're just
sense.
keep going. We're just gonna keep going because this is all good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, all right. So the strange thing about having a movie be made about your life is that you have very little control over anything. I've worked with the writer, Rod Barr, to craft the script, but it really is their take on everything. That's why they're calling it the conviction. And you have to understand there's so many parts to my story that are Hollywood-esque. They invariably just write themselves. The courthouse being struck by lightning while I'm being found guilty of a murder I didn't do. Like, you can't even make that up into Hollywood and they would believe it, but it really did happen, right? The escape that we talked about, the convoluted nature of the escape because my eyeglasses haven't been fogged up during the transport. my push to the limit of being the very first person in America to seek DNA testing over 15 years of surviving them trying to murder me by destroying the evidence. Again and again, there was just so many parts to this story that are so wow, that it was something I didn't have to have a lot of say in because it's all on the record. But it's still a very, very strange feeling to have a life story, like your story made into a major motion picture. And knowing that actors are going to play your mother, your father, they're going to portray the worst incidents of your life, the better incident, whatever they are. And then you're going to be ripped. You're going to be attacked. You're going to be torn apart while people praise you.
It is weird. They have to fit your whole life story into a 90 to 120 minute film. And you have to just sit the back while Hollywood critics critique the film. Is odd.
Yeah. Imagine this though. I've already kind of been through it, haven't I, with the Fear of 13?
Mm-hmm.
So in 2007, I went to Ealing Studios in London, and I asked a film team to create a faux death row cell so that I could invite the audience in my own mannerism of speaking and tell my own story of development. That got me huge ratings, and it was a great adventure where I'm sitting in England and I get a notification that the actors Jeff Bridges, Ben Foster, and Chris Pine are being interviewed about the movie Hell and High Water. When the interviewer asked them what did they watch in turn on television, and Chris Pine goes absolutely mental for the film Fear of 13, tells them all about me, and then insists on meeting me a few weeks later in Hollywood.
That's really cool.
Yeah, that's insane.
That'd be a good feeling.
It's one of those things where you have to have a really strong mindset about all this, because you can get caught up in the cult of celebrity that you're someone people are saying and it's not real. You know, it's fascinating. I have billionaire friends who know I struggle financially and have nothing, but they would never consider helping me financially. They need me to struggle and be in my position so they can tell people about me.
Interesting.
Oh, that's fucked.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That's actually really fucked up.
I know. But when you literally are only seen as a vessel of inspiration to someone, they're not going to ever equate you to having the same feelings as them. They're never going to fall prey to feeling that they could ever, I don't know, break code. It's a strange way of dealing with this, but I literally have friends who they would rather create a project to help me than to give me money and feed me, knowing that they could make money off of the project at the very least. And if I get something out of it, then they feel good about it.
It's kind of a backwards way. It's kind of a backwards way of thinking of helping.
Good friends.
Yeah, a rich man cries like a crocodile.
Yeah. Did you ever think that something like this would be happening? That you'd be having movies made about you and all these productions and all these things that would be done about your life?
I didn't know it, but I've always known that I had this crazy, weird adventure going on in my life that I can't explain. And it wasn't until I survived death row and I was speaking to governments in Europe, or I was on stage in Rome, did I start getting a glimpse that there was a possible story here that was far beyond anything I could have imagined being put a part of.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's like at the time you're probably like, because you got to think like as you're going through this, I'm sure this was not on your mind, but that you're going through an incredibly unique experience. Like how many people, like out of everyone in the world, how many people could say that they've lived a life like Nick Yarris?
Exactly.
That's the thing, right?
I know, like, to be caught up in riots in prison, to be condemned to death, to outlive your tormentors, to develop an education and come forward in life and make a real change and a positivity about where you came from as a low-life car thief, drug addict, to having self-respect and making people listen to you. There's a moment every now and again where I'm super proud of myself without the ego-driven need to, seek accolades. I'm really proud of the fact that I'm sane, that I'm generally a nice person, and that basically I think I can still go on. Isn't that a tremendous accomplishment?
That is tremendous. That's awesome. I was gonna ask, do you have a TikTok as well? Sorry if I missed that, but have you thought about making like a TikTok and doing these kind of like, I feel like you would do really, really well on there. Kind of with life advice.
I kind of do have them, but I don't really do them. It's funny. I only kept Instagram around because of my friend Simon Milne. I met this man when he had no followers, and I promised him as a chronic sufferer I wouldn't give up on him. But I turned away from most social media. I don't seem to be able to be lucky enough to make any money whatsoever off of it. It's just driven me to a negative, so I completely don't want to be sucked dry by that, constantly begging the internet for stuff.
That makes sense.
I know, and I got this feeling, it's so strange. Something's about to happen in my life, and I don't know what it is, but it's going to be big and profound. It's just wait it out. Be humble, be kind, and wait. I've done everything that I could to this moment to be deserving of good. That's all I can do.
Mm-hmm. I think if you think that way, it'll bring nothing but positivity. There's nothing. I mean, if you think that way, how can anything be negative, right?
Right. Like, in the last couple of months since my dad has died, I've had this eerie feeling. It all was like the culmination since my brother died in 2010 and then my mom died in 2011. And now I'm an orphan. And it's a strange feeling where I'm also in the transition of my life to move. So for me, I have a unique ability that I was so good at living while being tortured. It doesn't matter about my current situation. I'm going to be okay.
Do you ever find yourself kind of like struggling with this kind of like endless possibility, like lack of confinement also? I mean, now you're just completely free. Is that odd for you?
No, I mean, I'm so much focused in the here and now so often with thoughtfulness and trying to help people. There's a guy from Romania who struggles with stuttering. I've been messaging him. I use a lot of my quiet time to get people not to hurt themselves and fuck themselves up. Mm. In fact, I can show you if you want, I'll share messages, but let's see, in this last month alone, a young man had a baby. He was scared to death and tormenting himself about being validated to even feel like he deserved this baby. And he was so sure something's going to happen. The baby's going to die, something like that. Now he sends me a picture of the baby and he's happy. A guy in Mongolia, like I said, he wanted to start a podcast. I'm thinking you get little chances, anything like you can do for someone else, do it. You're not going to get 2 chances at it. And if you don't pay attention, someone is really going to feel shit because they were really sincere about reaching out to you and then you didn't give them 2 minutes of your time.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's a nice way to think. That's good though. And that's so true.
Moving the ego from stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
Just being a good person.
Do you think that's kind of your passion now? Is like helping? Is that your true passion? Do you want to like in the future, just like
It
go around
is-
helping people?
It isn't anything I've asked for, but people genuinely trust me with their most intimate pains and sorrows. I mean, I've had messages that blew me away. The lady was sitting there, "Dear Mr. Yarris, I know you don't know me. I was taking a handful of pills in my bed. I had just said goodbye to my kitty cats. I wasn't going to do much. I put on Netflix in the background just to give myself something to listen to. And invariably, as I was starting to take my pills to kill myself, your voice came on, and suddenly I began to listen. Sitting in the middle of my bed crying with a bottle of pills around me, and I know I'm not going to take them now because I've listened to you."
Jeez, that's profound.
That's powerful.
That's
Yeah.
heavy. That's heavy. That would kind of mess with me a little bit. I'm not gonna lie.
Well, what it will do to you if it's ever aimed at you is make you realize you can never step back from who you are.
I also think people probably have you probably have this innate thing about you now because you've gone through like what barely anyone has gone through, and that people can look at you and be like, if this guy can come out of this and still be a positive figure, have positive emotions, and after all he's been through, then I can still do it too. I think that's a lot of it because like you've gone through anything a human, like any fucked up thing a person can go through, you've probably gone through it and come out of it.
That is, yeah. Look, I don't know why I've been able to sanely navigate this all. And that's what I keep going back to. I should be fucked up. There's no possible way I should be a normal, functioning, kind, gregarious, outgoing person that I am. I should be mentally fucked up. But I'm not.
I was telling the guys when we finished the first one, sorry to interrupt you, I'm so sorry. But I was telling him, like, man, for everything he's gone through, he is like an incredibly nice guy.
Yeah.
Like he's like you're one of the nicest guys we've spoken to on our podcast ever.
What do you want, man? Do you want somebody to take your shit from you? I've been beat and hurt and tortured and robbed and humiliated and raped. I've done fucking wrong so many times. I don't want any of that. So what I want the ability to go into a room and sit down amongst men and we have an amazing conversation and it's a decent feeling between us because there's no ego left in me.
Yeah, speaking about like you kind of removing your ego from yourself, I was going to say if you believe at all like in unity and stuff, I think that the more genuine you are as a person, the more other people can recognize themselves in you. And that's probably why you get some people reaching out to you because they see like a little piece of themselves in your story or in what you've shared.
Yeah, there's a real truth to what we emulate in life as the best qualities of what we feel good about ourselves being. Mm-hmm. And I like that. I like it that I inspire other men to be thoughtful around me, not to be knuckle dragging and silly and stupid. And it always seems to bring out a better energy that way. And I love it when I meet people and they've been through a lot of things, but they just couldn't articulate that path from recognition to sublime understanding on through the development and then letting go. They were caught somewhere in a branch somewhere, and only until they spoke to me did they feel like they made the nexus between those branches and got down out of that tree.
Mm-hmm.
So now, when you finally got out, I meant to ask you this on the last time we were last on here. What was it like? I don't know if we talked about this. When you got out, what was that feeling like, and what was the process for when you first got out? Like
After solitary,
yeah, after
Because I know there's a lawsuit involved there too, and how soon was that?
So when I first got out, all of the politicians in the Philadelphia area were terrified to be seen with me.
Mm-hmm.
No one was podcasting. There was no large groups out there. I made the mistake, it's a sad thing, to of being turned down by every single innocence project in America.
All of them turned you down?
Yep.
Why's that?
Were they not convinced? Were they not convinced by the overturning of your sentence?
No. This is during my 15 years of being the very first.
Gotcha.
No Innocence Project took up my case and helped me, which was a huge penalty. Because then, when I got out, no one could grab me in their arms and raise huge amounts of money for their organization by showing what good deeds they did. In fact, I am the biggest mistake every one of those organizations made, and they kind of closed ranks on me. It was only because of my really good friendship with Barry Scheck and Peter Neufeld personally that they came on board and helped me. So I ended up in a movie in America called After Innocence with Phil Donahue and Barry Scheck and Peter Neufeld. And I kind of just blew up on the scene. They filmed me going to the courthouse every Monday and fighting for the victim with a bullhorn, because they weren't trying to catch the real killer. I went to the courthouse every Monday with a bullhorn and I protested that. Mm-hmm. And then I finally managed to get them lawyered out and file a lawsuit against them because they were going to make me suffer. They weren't going to help me financially. I was living in my parents' basement and I had no help. So I had to fight for everything I got when I first got out of jail.
How soon was it that after you got released and the movies happened that you were on Joe Rogan then? How did that like transition start? Like how did Joe Rogan reach out to you? And
Joe Rogan only reached out to me because I got angry at him. So sorry about this. In 2015, the movie The Fear of 13 came out, and a good friend of mine, Jason, works out in an MMA gym out in Los Angeles with Eddie Bravo. They're friends. Jason tells Eddie about me. Eddie tells Joe Rogan about me. Joe Rogan puts out a tweet about me and him going to do the podcast. Let's do this. And then nothing. And so in 2018, I was living in Oregon, and a friend of mine back in England named Brian was praising Joe on his birthday, August 12th, I think 11th, right? So that's the same day as my daughter who died in my arms' birthday. And I jumped on the tweet and I said, no, fall back, Brian. It ain't like that, dude. Ain't like that. And then next thing you know, I got a personal message from Joe in my inbox saying that he was going to bring me on the show.
And what was that like when you got to go out there and everything?
An absolute nightmare.
Why?
I got suckered into meeting Stedman Graham the night before, Oprah Winfrey's husband, at a big shindig by a man who lied to me and said that Stedman knew who I was and thought I was amazing. And I walked into the event, walked right up to Stedman and made a goddamn fool out of myself. So when they did an intro to everybody, I blew the room away. And then when they tried to stop the ceremony and keep going on, I said, oh, by the way, I'm walking out. I said, I've been lied to get here and I'm not staying. And he all have to come to excuse me. And I walked out. So I walked out of this big event with Stedman Graham and all these wealthy people, got into a car, drove back to Los Angeles, where I was staying at Joe's hotel. And then I didn't speak to the idiot that took me through this adventure. I went to 2 meetings the next morning before Joe Rogan's podcast for my film to be developed and funded, and did a big interview with the LA Times. And then walked into the studio completely mashed and wrecked and upset. And I fucked it up.
You don't think you did a good job on it?
Nope. I was a mess. I was an emotional wreck. Me and my missus were fighting. It was just fucked up. I didn't even sleep the night before. I had one of those stupid comforters. Man, I was worn out.
That's the worst when you leave somewhere knowing that you could have given a little bit more. That's a really bad feeling. I know. Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah, because, yeah. And at the same time, look what happened. Like I'm wearing a T-shirt on that show that says "Bottle Keeper." They had to get a deal on Shark Tank and multi-million-dollar deal. What do I get out of it?
Yeah. Oh wow, a little free advertising you did for them on accident.
Jesus.
Fucked up. No, they hired me to go on there, and then after they got their deal, that was it.
Oh, oh my God, they didn't
God.
even let you in on it. No way. Damn. That's
I
a good lesson for people. Make sure you got your ducks in a
Yeah,
row.
so that's why when I just did that Loud Bible podcast to 160 million people, I wore mine. So far, it's crazy. In the last 5 months, I might be broken on it, but I've reached over 180 million people, haven't I?
Yeah, that's why I said I think it's really important that you get bigger on TikTok. I think TikTok's a really good avenue for people to get their story out there. And you'll see, like, whenever we put these clips out and everything, you'll probably get yourself a little spark.
Dude, you should see the guy. The guy just got 7 million hits off of one TikTok video of me.
Yeah.
I think we saw. I think that was the one you were sending.
Yeah. You should get on there yourself so that people, everyone can tag you. And
I can't. You keep saying this. I'm trying to tell you. For some cockamamie odd reason, I can't get this. I can't get it done.
I think you can.
Yeah, you keep saying that.
I think you got
You're
it.
about the 100th person that has tormented me by saying this, man, and it just doesn't fucking work.
But the thing
I
is, you
can't
don't need
break
it.
through. It breaks my heart. I don't know what to do. I'm going to go off and I swear to God, if I could go get a food truck and make Philly cheesesteaks over here in this country, no one would ever see me again. I actually dream of changing my fucking name and getting away from all this, man.
Fair.
So
Fair.
So do you sometimes, when you're doing all this stuff, and everyone's hearing your story, do you sometimes regret having done all this stuff? Like, do you sometimes wish you could just disappear and just go live life?
Nope, because I know at the end of the day, boys, you're going to reach somebody that hasn't heard about me, and we're going to help them not feel really fucked up.
That's
And it's worked at one person.
For someone
Yeah.
that is, let's say, like, for someone that may catch one of these clips and they're kind of lost in life, whether they're a teenager, they're caught up in a bad family situation, everything's not going, whatever is just happening in their life, what is one thing that you have done yourself that has gotten you through some of the toughest moments that you would want to share with somebody else going through their toughest moment?
I recognize two things. One, no matter where you come from in life, you can change. Two, you never know what words can mean to someone. And as long as you're willing to keep speaking, you can heal yourself. It's when we stop talking that we fall apart.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it sounds like something that I took from what you've mentioned is that you fill your quiet time by helping other people, living kind of a life of service. And, you kind of keep yourself going by knowing that, like, videos like this might help someone else. So it seems like that's something that you do to, get a little bit of benefit for yourself as well.
What did Picasso say? That the meaning of life was to find your gift, and the purpose of your life was to give that gift away.
And so what is your gift that you've recognized in yourself?
Neuroplasticity healing.
Yeah.
I've developed neuroplasticity healing for the world.
Mm-hmm.
I can teach people how to erase PTSD. Look at me, man. I shouldn't be functioning, but I'm not only functioning, I'm highly functioning, and I'm about to succeed in life when all factors should point to degradation. Why? It's not an incredibly strong mind. It's actually practicing neuroplasticity healing by being an exceedingly polite person. If I am engaged in a daily ritual of politeness, I don't have time to get in my own head and just torment myself with stupid thoughts, do I?
Right. Are you surrounded by you've kind of started this new thing over in London, UK. Are you surrounded by people out there? Do you have people that you know there that you're hanging out with, or?
I hardly talk to anyone.
Really?
I know I have a guy that I work for doing landscaping, but no, I don't have a life yet. I was dreaming of having the life and when I came back here, but it all fell apart. So I sit here again, dreaming of starting my life over. My hope is to go to Ireland and get a one-man stage play going and start a life and be happy again.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if we touched on this, Nick. How did you end up in the UK?
Yeah, you gave your RV away, and I don't
Is that
want to
what
hear
it
about
was?
that.
All right, so I got CT brain injury, man, and it's real. This is what it's sad. I understand why men wake up out of their sleep and kill people or kill themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I understand why Sean Merriman killed himself and an NFL player killed 8 people in a house. It's a terrible illness. So I have a plaque buildup on my brain, and I can't spend a lot of time alone because it's hurting me to do so. So I had to leave the woods of Oregon after living alone like that for years, try and come back and start my life over. So I did. I threw caution to the wind. I gave my car away. I gave my RV away. And I came back to England and try and start. I have a 17-year-old daughter here. I haven't seen in 10 years. I'm nowhere near closer to seeing her, but I keep trying.
Mm-hmm.
In the meantime, at least I'm not in the woods of Oregon suffering in that heat. And I'm not lost in America with no one around me. I might have a chance to start over here anyway. So we'll see what happens.
There's kind of like that thought, and I want to get your take on it. There's I can't remember exactly how it goes, but there's a saying something about like, you know, even if you like move locations, you can't move from yourself. How much have you thought about that?
Well, my life is so completely different than that.
Mm-hmm.
I already know exactly where I'm meant to be. So many occurrences have happened in the last few weeks and months. I am exactly where I'm supposed to be. My dreams keep telling me that. Events keep telling me this. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be for a reason. I'm okay with that. And if it's hard, so what? I've had it harder. I have a bank account, I call it. And one day, things were so hard, I sat down and I wrote a letter to the courts and I asked to give up. And any time that I have a hard day, I open up that bank account and I say, this ain't that thing.
Yeah.
I think you're an extremely resilient person, Nick. I think honestly, whatever you're going to be doing, you've gone through unimaginable things. I think that you are on the cusp of having a big change in your life and something very profound happening, like you said. I think everything is about to change for you in a big way. I truly believe it just by listening to your story, like just us talking.
If nothing else, I swear to God. If nothing else, I swear to God, I keep getting the feeling to go to Ukraine and try and help with aid relief and try and help people that hurt. Fuck it.
I've always felt
my father said to me before he died, my father's Russian and my mother's Ukrainian. I can't believe that my grandparents would be fighting. My parents would be fighting.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So whatever happens, I just know this much. I put in all of the effort up to this point to be okay. Thanks to you guys, I got my passport sorted out. I'm able to go. I just got to figure out where that is and be okay with that mentally, you know? I've had this longing for many years to go to Ireland. I just always wanted to go there. I visited once. Maybe I'll make it. You know what I mean?
I think you should go wherever I always think you should just do whatever you think you should do. Honestly, that's whatever you feel like will make you truly happy.
I'm sitting here on a promise, though. I can't fall apart. I can't give up on my friend Alex. He has 6 months to live, every 6 months for 10 years. He's dealing with a cancer that's so vicious. I can't break code. I got to sit here every day until next week. And we'll wait for this meeting with these people in London and see if they're going to help me. I got a chance to do the pitch. At least that's all I can try. But I'm not going to give up on Alex, and I'm not going to go to Ireland until I finish my promise to make this film with him. So come hell or high water, I'm going to fight it out here on the ground.
You're a good man to have in a corner.
Yeah.
Oh boy, if you yell my name loud enough and I love you, I'll come for you. That's how it is. Like
That's
I'll
awesome.
fucking come.
I love that.
Yeah.
Love that.
Well, Nick,
Yeah. Go ahead, sir.
oh, no, go ahead. Whatever you say. I don't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
I've always never had really amazing friends like that, so I always wanted to be that for someone else.
That's the best way to get amazing friends, is by being that person, and then you find the right people. They come to you.
And I get handed the craziest story, and it's like torment. I'm living on the Pacific Ocean in Oregon. I go through this really dark time of losing my family. I meet a shaman who tells me I was going to be given the answers by the crystals. And I told him I didn't get into mineralogy. I didn't believe in any of that. And he said, no, you'll see. I go into town, and a woman named Crystal, who works for a number named a woman who owns the shop, is named Crystal, starts telling me about this woman and her other job who spit in her face in a restaurant for not wearing a mask. I tell her, as I always do, and all I could do to make up for that vulgarity was every time I came into that shop was to be exceedingly polite to her and nice to her. So she invited me to go to a restaurant and see if I could get a job, and I did. My first day home, I bring food home with me from the restaurant that I made, and a car pulls up next to me, and a guy gets out with a walking stick, but he's young. He walks off, and him and his dog are there, and my dog's run off with his dog, and I start talking to him. I share my food with him that I made at the restaurant. He can't believe I made Philly cheesesteaks. And he's from Washington, D.C., grew up at Eagles fan, and always got tortured for it. He moved out to Washington State. His old lady left him when he got diagnosed with cancer, and he was on the road for 9 years at that point.
Whoa.
Next thing you know, me and Alex are best friends because of the crystals.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm making a documentary about his life. And I didn't ask for this life, man. This is what drives me crazy. People call me a liar. Like, I can't even make shit like that up. His name is Alex Bertoli, and he lives in Washington State. And the crazy thing is, I just made a documentary film trailer for his story by coming here to England, driving in a car that had a bag of jelly beans in it that I couldn't get to until I got out of the car. And I met an Australian filmmaker who made the fucking documentary sizzle for us without even meeting Alex, just based on me telling him the story about Alex.
What?
That's awesome.
Little things like that.
I think it's just a lot to do with you just being super open to like any and all possibilities and opportunities, and just actually being able to accept that they're there in front of you. A lot of people really would turn that down or not talk to that person.
Andrew, they cracked me open back.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know, fellas. I just feel like there's this chance, this real chance I can pull off all this amazing good. And all I have to do to win is be a nice person, I keep telling myself. Just don't let nobody ruin that for me. Now, I've had my daughter taken off me. I haven't seen her in 10 years. I had a baby die in my arms. I've been robbed by a lot of people. I've been misled, used. I had people make a fortune off me and all those things, right? So far, so good. No one's been able to steal my kindness.
Yeah, you could very much be a bitter man, but you choose not to be, and that's why these opportunities keep coming to you to, eventually change the whole direction of your life.
I hope so, man. Look what we've done in just, a little bit of time instead of down and talking, and how much today means something to us.
Yeah.
As you pass someone in their car or on the street today, how much did they speak about life or put an effort into thinking about perspectives and shit? We're so often on a blur. We're not even thinking about our most precious thing, life. We spend so little time thinking about it, and yet I've spent decades of it just sitting there thinking about it.
Yeah, it's really powerful. Like, I mean, I think everyone can notice, like, the second they take themselves off autopilot and actually consider some things a little bit more important than their day to day, even if that's a couple minutes or a couple hours here and there, you tend to have a very different day than you would have otherwise, or maybe even a different few days. So as often as you can get back to those conversations, probably the better off you'll be.
That's why I'm so blessed, Amy. Every day I wake up, there's a message on Instagram saying, like, "Dear Mr. Yarris, I struggle with this," or "Hi, I saw you on this podcast and I want you to know it's really profound." And that's such a blessing. There's only so many times you can find that you've done a good, but not really. I keep finding them. That's the blessing. I keep finding so many times I've done good, so many times. So maybe that's what I'm.
Hey, Nick, your finger is on the camera a little bit, just so you know. There you go. Better. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry about that.
You're good.
A little bit warm there now.
Nah, you're good.
I've been sick the last few days, guys. I was straight on my back. It was crazy. So I missed 2 days of work for being sick too. That really killed it.
You feeling better now?
Hell no. No, I did. So I got a blessing. A gentleman got me the hotel room, and I think I 38 of 50 some hours I slept. Like I slept. So yeah, I'm getting back to being okay, but I'm all stiff and sore. My body's catching up on my rest, aren't I?
Feeling better now, though. It's a little bit better, hopefully.
Yeah, we got to be careful. There's a few viruses going around now because of the cruise ships. It's called the neurovirus. And it's really nasty. It comes in different forms. It's easily transmittable. There's also a flu-like bug going around over here, new forms of COVID, so you never know. But I did get waylaid by something that knocked me down, and I'm really strong, so if I'm on my back for 2 days, it's bad. You know what I mean? And I kept working, so I'm a maniac.
Well, honestly, Nick, I think we got everything we need. We had a great conversation. Honestly, I appreciate you coming back on. Give us a little bit more time.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate that, honestly, and taking more time. And sorry about the technical difficulties fucking up everything.
No, listen to this. Mm-hmm. Let's look at it this way, man. You guys could be blowing up and never even know it. You could have a hit, and like the next hit. You never know, right? I always look at it this way. A, you gave me nothing but respect. B, you trusted me when I told you I needed help. C, you gave me an opportunity to speak. What more can I ask for?
Yeah, well, thank you.
You're the most genuine dude ever, man.
It's so odd. It's just
I appreciate you. I appreciate
very nice.
You all.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Some people we have had on are not like that.
Well, the three of you need to have the same fucking conversation with yourselves as well as everyone else, because this is your legacy, man. Yeah? Come on, man. Beat me at this game. Look, I'm going to be the heavyweight champ. Anybody in the room want to take me on? I want to be the heavyweight champion, kindness. I do. I want to put it out there so that I learn the lesson again and again, every chance out to be even nicer the next time. Mm-hmm. Why? Because you don't even know, and I'm erasing my PTSD by talking to you now. I ain't got time to think about things that have happened to me while I'm being nice to you.
I like that.
Isn't it eerie? I'm saying the same shit Mike Tyson's saying, and I don't even know that man. Yeah. He's never met me, but he keeps saying the same things I'm saying. There comes a point in your life where the most precious thing to you is the feeling of being a good person. Man, I wish I had known this a long time ago, boy.
I'm glad we're getting this insight from you. I mean, just helping us.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Leave a legacy, man. Leave a good legacy. Everybody's out there flashing on the internet and flexing, and we're watching in real time as everybody's like detaching from the best parts of themselves. This is the time more than ever that to really reach out to others and make the connections, make them feel good in their personal lives, because they're already having it stripped away from them right on their telephone. And I'm well aware of the irony as I hold mine in my head and talk.
Yeah, no, you're right though. You were 100% right. It's a weird
Right?
time.
Okay, fellas, let's leave the world with one good feeling. Today, at least for a minute, I got to be a free person. I got all of the same things a free person was offered: respect, camaraderie, joyous laughter, and caring. How much more brilliant could I feel as a human being for knowing I earned all that just by simply giving you the same?
I couldn't put into better words, honestly. Perfect way to say
No,
it.
man, this is a proven. Thank you, brother. I hope you guys continue on with success, and I hope you do well. Anytime you need an update or insight, reach out, man.
Yeah,
Perfect.
thank
Yeah.
you.
Definitely
Fair
keep
enough.
in touch, and good luck with everything
Yeah,
you're working
honestly.
on. I'm excited to see what happens for you in the next few years. And thank you so much again for coming.
Thank you, guys.
We appreciate you, man.
Yeah, take care. Be safe. Yeah.
All
Thank
right.
you. You
Thanks,
too.
guys. Everyone, we'll see you next week.
God bless you.
God
See ya.
bless you. See ya.